Dead stars are quiet places. This one had died long ago, and now it was only a cold ember hanging in empty space, giving off no light and no heat. Nothing lived here. Nothing came here. That was exactly why the Auran Dominion had placed a border fleet at its edge. The fleet sat in a wide ring, 90 warships facing outward like teeth around a mouth. They had been here for 200 days. In that time they had scanned 3 comets, 1 lost cargo drone, and a cloud of ice. Each object had been named, measured, and filed away in less than a heartbeat. That was the pride of the Dominion. They did not fight blind, they knew. Fleet Lord Serac walked the length of his command deck with his hands behind his back. He was old for the work, and his skin had gone pale grey the way his people's skin did with age. He did not need to walk the deck. Every screen could be brought to his chair, but he liked to move. Moving reminded the young officers that someone was watching and that someone had done this longer than they had been alive. Anything, he asked, the way he asked every hour. Nothing, Fleet Lord, an officer answered. The system is clean. Serac nodded and kept walking. He did not expect anything. In the Dominion, expecting things was a waste. You did not expect. You scanned and then you knew, and knowing was better than any guess. The peace held for another hour. Then a soft tone sounded across the deck. It was not an alarm. It was the small, polite note the sensors made when they found something new to name. At the back of the deck sat Analyst Talon, the youngest officer on the ship. She was small, quick-eyed, and still new enough to find the work exciting. Her station lit up with the contact. She reached for it with a smile, ready to do her job the way she had done it 1,000 times in training. Contact, she said. One vessel just crossed the outer line. Serac did not stop walking. Class it. That was the whole of it. See the ship, class the ship, forget the ship. She had done this in her sleep. She sent the standard sweep out toward the contact, a wide invisible net of light and sound, and she waited for the answer to come back and fill her screen with clean, simple facts. The answer came back. It was not clean, and it was not simple. Talon frowned. She read it again. The screen showed the ship, yes, a small shape drifting slowly into the dead system, but where the class and the name and the origin should have appeared, there was only a mess of numbers fighting each other. The system had tried to name the ship and failed. At the bottom of the screen, in small letters, it had done something she had never once seen it do. It had flagged its own result as an error. That is strange, she said, mostly to herself. The officer beside her leaned over. Bad sweep, run it again. She ran it again. She got the same mess. She got the same small, quiet error flag, as if the ship itself was shrugging at her. Serac had stopped walking. He had good ears, and the word strange carried on his deck. What is strange, analyst? Talon straightened up. The contact, Fleet Lord, I cannot class it. The sweep returns an error. For a moment no one spoke. In the Dominion, sweeps did not return errors. A sweep might tell you a ship was armed, or empty, or dying, but it always told you something. It was like being told that water had refused to be wet. Serac crossed the deck in a few long steps and stood behind her chair. He looked at the mess on her screen the way a teacher looks at a wrong answer, sure that the mistake was hers and not the machine's. You aimed it wide, he said. Narrow the sweep, center it on the hull. She did. She sent a tight, careful beam right at the heart of the little ship. This time, there could be no mistake, no spread, no confusion. The beam touched the hull and came back. The screen filled again with fighting numbers. The error flag returned, calm and patient, like it had all the time in the world. Serac stared at it for a long moment. The lines around his eyes had gone hard. Show me the vessel, he said quietly. Talon pulled the image forward. The ship floated onto the main display for the whole deck to see, and the low talk on the bridge went silent. It was not large, it was not beautiful. It was, if anything, ugly. The hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates, some dull, some dark, some scarred, as if the ship had been broken 100 times and mended 100 times by 100 different hands. Nothing about it matched. It had no clean lines, no proud shape, none of the sharp order that every Dominion ship wore like a uniform. It looked less like a warship and more like a thing that had been dragged out of a scrapyard and told to fly. And it was flying, slowly, steadily, without fear, straight into the guns of 90 Dominion warships. Serac watched it come. Somewhere deep in his old and careful mind, a small cold feeling began to stir. He had spent his whole life trusting the scanners. The scanners had never once failed him. They had told him the truth about every enemy he had ever faced, and knowing the truth had kept him alive while braver fools had died. Now, for the first time, the scanners had looked at something and come back with nothing. "Run it once more," he said. "Full power, I want an answer." Talon swallowed and reached for the controls. She did not know it yet, but she was about to begin the first of 3 checks that would break everything the Dominion believed about the shape of the universe. The ugly little ship drifted closer, quiet and patient, keeping its secrets. There is a kind of silence that fills a room when smart people stop being sure of themselves. That silence had come to Serac's command deck, and it grew heavier with every second the ugly little ship drifted closer. Serac did not like silence on his deck. He filled it with orders. "We will do this properly," he said, loud enough for every officer to hear. 3 checks. The old way, we will not guess and we will not panic. Analyst, begin with composition. Talon felt steadier when he said it like that. The 3 checks were the first thing every scanner officer learned. What is it made of? What powers it? How dangerous is it? 3 questions, 3 answers, and then you knew the truth of any ship in the sky. She had passed her exams on these 3 checks. She could do them without thinking. She sent out the composition scan. This was the simplest of the 3. It read the skin of a ship and told you the metals and materials it was built from. Every people in the galaxy built their ships from a handful of known materials, and every material had a clear signature, like a color. Read the colors, and you knew the maker. The scan touched the patchwork hull and returned its report. Talon read it once and did not understand it. She read it again and understood it, and wished she did not. "Fleet Lord," she said slowly, "the hull is made of everything." Serac came to her side. "Explain." "There is no single material. There are dozens, old alloys and new ones, ceramics, plating from at least 6 different worlds that I can name and some I cannot. They are not blended. They are simply bolted together side by side, plate by plate." She looked up at him, lost. "It reads like 3 or 4 different ships were cut apart and welded into one. No shipyard in the Dominion would ever build like this. It would be forbidden. It should not hold together at all." Serac stared at the report. In his long life, he had seen ships from 100 worlds, and every one of them had been built to a single clean plan. A ship was a statement of who made it. This ship was a statement of nothing, or of everything, which was worse. "That is check 1, he said, and his voice was flat. "Move to power." The power scan was harder and prouder. It read the beating heart of a ship, the reactor, the flow of energy through its bones. From that flow, the Dominion could tell you how fast a ship could run, how hard it could hit, and how long it had left to live. The Dominion's greatest weapon was not its guns. It was this: they could look at an enemy's power and know its future before the enemy knew it themselves. Talon sent the scan. It reached into the little ship and read its heart. The reading came back broken. The energy did not flow the clean, smooth way it should. It jumped and dropped, spiked and sank in a wild pattern with no order to it. To the Dominion's models, this was the signature of a reactor about to fail. The screen even said so in urgent letters: "Core failure likely. Vessel SHOULD be disabled." "It is dying," an officer said with relief. "The reactor is failing. We can simply wait." But Talon was watching the ship, not the screen. The ship was not slowing. It was not drifting. It was not doing any of the things a dying ship did. It flew straight and level and calm, its broken heart beating in a way that should have killed it, holding perfectly steady. "No," she said, "the screen says it is failing, but look, it flies as if nothing is wrong. The reading says it should be dead, and it is not dead. It is fine." Serac watched the ugly ship hold its course, and the small, cold feeling in his chest grew a little larger. The power scan had never lied to him. If it said a ship should be dead, the ship died. He had built his whole career on that certainty. "Check 2, he said quietly. "Failed, move to the last." The third check was the one the whole Dominion trusted above all others. It was the threat class. It took everything, the hull, the power, the shape, the movement, and it weighed it all and gave a single answer. How much of a danger is this? Every ship in the galaxy received a threat class. A rock got a low class. A war fleet got a high one. In 200 years of use, the threat class had never once refused to answer. It was the steady ground the whole empire stood upon. Talon ran it. She did not breathe while it worked. The whole deck watched her screen. The threat class did not give a low number. It did not give a high number. It gave nothing at all. Where the number should have been, there was a single word, and the word was one that Talon had only ever seen in old training notes as a warning that should never appear in real life. Unclassifiable. The deck was silent again, and this silence was the deepest yet. "That is not possible," said an officer. "Everything has a class. A grain of dust has a class." "Not this," Talon whispered. "It cannot be measured. The system does not know what it is looking at. It is not low threat. It is not high threat. It is off the whole scale. It does not fit anywhere." Serac stood very still. 3 checks. What is it made of? And the answer was everything. What powers it? And the answer was impossible. How dangerous is it? And the answer was unknown. For the first time in his long and careful life, the machines he trusted had looked at the enemy and confessed that they were blind. And far away, in the sector command, a colder and prouder man was about to hear the news, and he would not take it kindly at all. Bad news travels fast in an empire, and it travels fastest of all to the people who hate it most. High Overseer Dan was 1,000 light years away in a tower of dark stone at the heart of the sector command when the report from the dead star reached his desk. He read it once, he read it twice, then he pushed it away as if it smelled bad. Dan had built his power on a simple promise. He told his masters that the border was safe, that the scanners never failed, that the Dominion always knew what stood before it. This one small report made him a liar in 3 short lines. He did not care about the ugly ship. He cared that it made him look like a fool. He opened a channel to the border fleet, and his cold face filled Serac's main screen. "Fleet Lord," Dan said, "I am told your scanners have failed, all 3 checks, on one small ship. Explain to me how the finest fleet in the sector has been beaten by a piece of scrap." Serac did not flinch. He had faced worse men than Dan. "The scanners have not failed, High Overseer. They work perfectly. They simply cannot name this ship, because this ship does not follow any rule the scanners were built to read." "That is the same thing," Dan snapped. "A tool that cannot do its work is a broken tool. I want this resolved. I want the contact named, filed, and forgotten before it becomes a story that spreads. Do you understand me? I will not have the sector laughing at us over a floating pile of junk." Serac was quiet for a moment. Then he did something that surprised even himself. "Before we act," he said, "I would like to speak to it." Dan's face twisted. "Speak to it? It is a target, not a guest." "It flew straight toward 90 guns without fear," Serac said. "A thing that does that is either mad or it knows something we do not. I would like to learn which before I fire." Dan waved a gray hand. "Waste your breath then, but when it tells you nothing, you will destroy it. That is an order." The screen went dark. Serac turned to his deck. "Open a channel to the vessel, all standard languages, full imperial greeting." Talon sent the hail. She used the proud old words the Dominion always used, the words that told smaller peoples exactly who they were dealing with and exactly how small they were. She expected fear in return, a shaking voice, a plea, or perhaps a challenge, guns lighting up, a fight. She got none of those things. The channel opened, and a woman's voice came through, easy and warm and completely unbothered, as if she had been waiting a while and was mildly glad someone had finally called. "Oh good," the voice said. "I was starting to think you lot were just going to stare all day. You've been scanning me for 20 minutes. Find anything good?" The whole deck stared at the speaker. This was not how anyone spoke to the Auran Dominion. Serac stepped forward. "This is Fleet Lord Serac of the Auran Dominion Border Fleet. Identify your vessel, your people, and your purpose in this system. Sure, the voice said. I'm Captain Rel Vance. Ship's called the Longshot. We are human, and our purpose is mostly to get through this dead old system and out the other side without any trouble. We're just passing through. A pause. You're the trouble, by the way, in case that wasn't clear. Serac ignored the last part. Human, he repeated. His scanners held no record of such a people. We do not know your kind. No, Vance agreed cheerfully. You wouldn't. We're a long way from home and we keep to ourselves. First time out this far, actually. Serac decided to press where it hurt. Captain, my scanners cannot read your ship. They cannot say what it is made of. They cannot understand its power. They cannot measure its danger. I have never seen this before. I am giving you the chance to explain it to me. Why does your ship break my machines? For the first time, the voice paused, and when it came back, it was almost amused. Break your machines? They're not broken, they're just confused. And yeah, I can explain it. It's not even a secret. On the human ship, far from the cold deck of the Dominion, the picture was very different. The bridge of the Longshot was small and warm and cluttered. Captain Vance sat with her boots up on the console, a bowl of food going cold in her lap. Behind her, a big man named Okafor was half inside an open panel, fixing something with his hands, and a sharp young officer named Hale was grinning at the scanner feed the Dominion did not know they could see. Your machines, Vance said into the channel, want everything to be neat. One metal, one clean engine, one tidy shape. That's how you build, right? Same plan, every ship. So your scanners learn to read neat things. Fine, good for you. She looked around her own messy bridge and smiled. But we don't build neat. This ship's been broken and fixed on 40 different worlds by 40 different people with whatever they had lying around. That's why your first scan saw 100 different metals, because there are 100 different metals. My engineer here wired the reactor to run rough on purpose, so it runs quiet and nobody can guess what it'll do. That's why your second scan thinks we're dying. We are not. We just don't hum the way you expect. Serac listened, and the cold feeling in his chest turned slowly to something sharper. And the third scan, Vance went on, gently now, almost kindly, the one that measures how dangerous we are. It couldn't give you a number. You know why? Because your scale was built by watching ships that follow rules. And we don't follow your rules, we never learn them. So there's no number for us. We don't fit on your chart at all. The line went quiet. Serac understood then the true shape of the thing he was facing. His whole empire was built to fight the knowable, and drifting toward him, calm and patient and ugly, was something that had simply refused to be known. High Overseer Dan, he said softly to himself, you are a bigger fool than I thought, and so perhaps am I. Orders are a strange thing. A good one can save a fleet, a bad one can end it. And the worst orders of all are the ones given by a proud man who is far away and cannot see what he is ordering. Dan's face returned to Serac's screen, and this time it was not asking, it was commanding. You have spoken to it, Dan said. You have your answers. Now stop wasting the sector's time. I have decided. You will engage the vessel, a controlled strike. Force it to reveal its true nature. If it dies, good. If it flees, better. Either way, this ends now. High Overseer, Serac said carefully. I would advise against firing on a thing we do not understand. We should watch it, study it, let it pass and learn from it. You will fire, Dan said, or I will find a fleet lord who will. Am I understood? Serac looked at the old faces of his officers and at the young, worried face of Talon, and he thought about how many of them might die for one proud man's pride. But he was a soldier of the Dominion, and he had followed orders his whole life. He did not know how to stop. Understood, he said. He closed the channel and turned to his deck. Prepare a controlled strike, forward guns. We will place shots around the vessel, not through it, and force it to move. When it moves, we will read how it moves, and then we will know it at last. This was the great strength of the Dominion. They did not simply shoot at where a ship was. They shot at where a ship would be. Their machines watched a ship's mass and its thrust and its shape, and from those numbers they knew, second by second, where it must go. A ship of a known weight could only turn so hard. A ship of a known engine could only run so fast. The Dominion aimed at the future, and the future had never escaped them. Firing, said the gunnery officer. The Dominion guns spoke. Beams of hard light reached across the dark toward the longshot, aimed not at the ship, but at the empty space the ship was certain to fly into. The longshot was not there. On its warm and cluttered bridge, Captain Vance had already thrown her cold food aside and taken the controls in her own two hands. She did not fly the way a machine flew. She flew the way a living thing flew, on feeling, on habit, on 100 old fights burned into her hands. She jinked the ship sideways at the last breath, a move no clean model would ever predict, because no clean ship could ever make it. They aimed where I was going, she said, half to herself, half to her crew, so I didn't go there. The beams passed through empty space and hit nothing. On the Dominion deck, the officers stared. Recalculate, Serac ordered. Read the new course, fire again. They fired again, at the new future, the corrected future, the future their machines swore the ship must fly into. And again the longshot was not there, because Vance did not fly toward any future a machine could name. She turned when the models said turn was impossible. She slowed when the models said she must speed up. She flew badly, on purpose, in a way that no ship built to a plan could ever fly, and every bad, wild, human choice put her exactly where the guns were not. Behind her, Okafor was doing his own kind of magic. He slammed power into the engines in short, hard bursts, then cut it, then slammed it again, so the ship's whole signature jumped and lied and jumped again. The Dominion's machines tried to read the reactor and predict the next move, and every time they read it, Okafor had already changed it. He was not smarter than their machines. He was just messier, and messiness cannot be predicted. Fleet Lord, Talon said, and there was wonder in her voice she could not hide, we are always one step behind. Every time we solve where it will be, it is somewhere else. The machines are perfect, but the ship does not obey the machines. Serac watched the ugly little ship dance between the beams of the finest fleet in the sector, and he understood at last that his whole way of war had just been turned into a joke. His guns were not weak, his aim was not poor, his machines were flawless, and none of it mattered, because you cannot outcalculate an enemy who does not calculate at all. Then the longshot stopped running. It turned, and for the first time it fired back. It had only a few small guns, old and mismatched like the rest of it, nothing that should trouble a war fleet. But Vance did not aim at armor. She aimed at the fragile scanner arrays, the delicate eyes of the Dominion ships, the very machines that had failed to see her all along. Hale called the targets, and the shots landed true, and one by one, the great scanner arrays of the border fleet went dark. We are losing eyes, an officer cried. 3 ships blinded, now 4. It was almost gentle, the way she did it. She did not blow the ships apart. She simply took away their sight, one array at a time, until 90 proud warships that had lived their whole lives knowing everything were suddenly, for the first time, forced to fight blind. And blind, they were nothing. Serac gripped the back of a chair and watched a single patched-up junker, crewed by a handful of tired people who had only wanted to pass through, take apart the certainty of an empire. He thought of Dan, safe in his stone tower, and of the order that had started this, and a slow anger began to burn in his old and careful heart. "Cease fire," he said. The gunnery officer turned. "Fleet Lord," the High Overseer ordered. "I said cease fire," Serac repeated louder. "Every gun, now." The guns fell silent. The dead star hung cold above them all, and out in the dark, the longshot slowed and waited, patient as ever, to see what the old Fleet Lord would do next. Some truths arrive slowly, over years. Others arrive all at once, in a single quiet moment, and change a person for the rest of their life. For Fleet Lord Serac, the truth arrived in the silence after he ordered his guns to stop. He stood on his blinded, beaten deck, and finally let himself understand. It had never been about the ship. He turned that thought over and found it was true. The longshot was old. Its guns were small. Its armor was thin. By every honest measure, it was weaker than any single ship in his fleet, far weaker than all 90 together. If you lined up the numbers on paper, the Dominion should have won 100 times over. And yet they had lost. Not because the humans had better tools, but because the humans could not be predicted, and the whole power of the Dominion rested on prediction. "We built the perfect eye," he said aloud, and his officers turned to listen. We taught it to read every ship in the galaxy, and it can. It reads them perfectly because they are all built to plans like us, one metal, one engine, one clean shape. We are all so orderly that we can be known at a glance. He looked at the dark where the long shot waited. But that ship has no plan. It changes faster than we can measure it. By the time we learn one trick, they have already made 3 more. Our order made us strong, and our order made us easy to guess. That is the whole of it. Talon came to stand beside him. She was young, and the young learn fast, and her eyes were bright with a thing that was half fear and half wonder. Then all our strength, she said slowly, was also our weakness. We were so sure of ourselves that we never learned to be surprised. Yes, Serac said, that is exactly it. The channel light blinked. Dan was calling again, no doubt to scream about the ceasefire. Serac looked at the light for a long moment, and then he made the second choice that would change his life. He did not answer his master. He opened the line to the humans instead. Captain Vance, he said, this is Serac. I have stopped my guns. I will not fire again. I am asking you, not ordering you, to hold your fire as well. The warm voice came back, and it was not gloating, which somehow made it worse and better at once. Already holding, Fleet Lord, I told you at the start. We're just passing through. We never wanted your fleet dead. I just needed you to stop shooting at me, and blinding you seemed politer than killing you. Politer, Serac repeated, and to his own surprise, a dry and tired laugh escaped him. Yes, I suppose it was. The channel light for Dan kept blinking, angry and ignored. Captain, Serac said, I must ask you something, and I ask it plainly. If a single old ship of your people can do this to my finest fleet, then what would a true war fleet of your kind do to my empire? I need to know how much I should fear you. There was a pause on the line. When Vance answered, her voice had changed. It was quieter now and more honest and a little sad. You're asking the wrong question, Fleet Lord, she said. You keep trying to measure us, that's the whole problem. You want a number for how strong we are, how dangerous we are, where we fit on your chart. But we don't fit on your chart, not because we're some great power. We are not. We're small and we're poor and we're a long way from home. We don't fit because we never hold still long enough to be measured. You're trying to weigh a river. By the time you've got the number, the water's already gone. Serac closed his eyes. On the human bridge, Vance watched her scanner feed, watched the 90 blinded ships hanging quiet in the dark, and she felt no triumph. She had seen too many fights to enjoy this one. Behind her, Okafor pulled his head out of the panel and Hale let out a long, slow breath, and the crew of the Longshot simply sat and waited, tired and alive. You are telling me, Serac said, that I cannot know you, that there is no scan, no check, no measure that will ever let me stand safely on the ground of knowing what you are. That's right, Vance said gently, and I think that's the thing that scares you most. Not our guns, not our ships, just that. For the first time, you're looking at something you can't file away and forget, and you don't know what to do with that feeling. She was right, and he knew it, and the knowing sat cold and heavy in his chest. But here's the part your High Overseer will never understand, Vance went on. You don't have to be afraid of us. We really were just passing through. You pointed guns at us because your machines couldn't name us, and a thing you can't name feels like a threat. But not knowing isn't the same as danger. Sometimes the thing you can't measure just wants to go home. You could have let us fly by. You still can. Serac opened his eyes and looked at his blinded fleet, at his frightened young analyst, at the cold, dead star that had watched the whole foolish fight. And behind all of it, he looked at the shape of the empire he had served his whole life, an empire that could not tell the difference between a thing it did not understand and a thing that meant it harm. Stand down all weapons, he said to his deck, his voice clear and final. Open a lane, let the human ship pass, on my authority and mine alone. The officers hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then they obeyed. The great ring of warships loosened, and a clear road opened through the fleet, out the far side of the dead system and into the open dark beyond. But there was one thing left that the humans had not yet told them. One last small truth about the ugly ship that had broken an empire's certainty. And when Serac learned it, he would understand just how badly the Dominion had misjudged everything. The road through the fleet lay open, and the Longshot began to move down it, slow and steady, in no hurry at all. Serac watched it come closer to his own ship on its way to the open dark, and he found he could not let it go without one last question. The question had been sitting in him since the very first failed scan, and he had to hear the answer or it would trouble him for the rest of his days. "Captain Vance," he said, "before you go, tell me the truth of your ship. My scanners called it a warship they could not classify. My whole fleet has treated it as a warship, but you have not fought like a warship. You blinded us and spared us. So tell me, what is the Longshot truly?" The warm voice laughed softly, and there was something almost kind in it. "A warship," Vance said. "Fleet Lord, the Longshot isn't a warship. It never was. She's a salvage boat. We find old wrecks and dead stations, and we strip them for parts, and we sell what we find. That's the whole job. Those few guns we've got are for pirates and rock cutting, not for fleets. We've got a crew of nine tired people who wanted to cross a dead system and go home." The words landed on the Dominion deck, like a stone dropped in still water. Serac stood very still. "A salvage boat," he said. "A salvage boat," Vance agreed. "Your machines ran 3 checks on us and couldn't explain the human warship because there was no human warship. There was just us, a junk hauler full of spare parts and a captain who's flown too many years to get shot by anybody's clean, tidy guns." A pause. "You were never fighting a great power, Fleet Lord. You were fighting a workboat, and you lost. Sit with that for a while." Talon made a small sound, and when Serac looked, he saw that all across the deck, the officers had gone pale. It was one thing to be beaten by a mighty enemy. It was another thing entirely to be beaten, blinded, and spared by a battered scrap hauler crewed by 9 ordinary people who had only wanted to be left alone. "If a salvage boat did this," Talon whispered, "then what would a real fleet of theirs?" "Do not finish that thought," Serac said quietly. "Some fears are better left unspoken. Dan will finish it for us soon enough, and the whole sector after him." He was right, the story would spread. There was no stopping it now. 90 warships had seen it. Blinded eyes could still talk. By the time the tale reached the stone tower of the sector command, it would carry a cold and simple lesson that no proud high overseer could argue away. The humans could not be measured, and the not knowing itself was the danger. An empire that had slept soundly on the pillow of perfect knowledge would not sleep so soundly again. The Longshot drew level with Serac's ship. For a moment the 2 vessels hung close together in the dark, the great clean warship of the Dominion and the small ugly patchwork of humanity, side by side. Serac looked at the mismatched hull, at the dozens of different plates from dozens of different worlds, and he no longer saw ugliness. He saw something he had no word for. A thing that had been broken again and again, and mended again, and had never once agreed to hold still and be understood. "Captain," he said, "thank you for sparing my fleet, and thank you for the lesson, hard as it was." "Take care of yourself, Fleet Lord," Vance said, "and do me one favor. Next time your machines can't name something, don't reach for your guns. Maybe just say hello. You'd be surprised how often a thing you can't measure just wants to pass by." The channel closed. The Longshot's rough engine flared, jumping and dropping in that same broken way that should have killed it and never did, and the little salvage boat slid down the open road, through the loosened ring of warships, out the far side of the dead system, and into the wide dark beyond. In a breath it was gone, off to its next ordinary day, and its crew of 9 never once looked back. On the bridge of the Longshot, Captain Vance took her hands off the controls at last and let out a long breath. She picked up the bowl of food she had thrown aside at the start of the fight. It had gone stone cold. She ate it anyway. "They still think we were a warship, you know," Hale said, grinning. "Some of them, maybe," Vance said around a mouthful. "The smart one figured it out. Old fellow, he'll remember us." Okafor pulled his head out of the panel one last time and wiped his hands on a rag. "This little dance added about 40 new repairs to my list," he grumbled. "Blinding a fleet is hard on the guns. I've got work for a month." "You always have work for a month," Vance said. "Because you always fly us into things like that. And you always fix us out the other side." She smiled and set the empty bowl down. "That's the job." The crew laughed, tired and easy, and the Longshot flew on into the dark. 9 ordinary people in a broken old boat, none of them aware that behind them, They had just cracked the certainty of an empire that spanned half a galactic arm. Far behind, on his blinded flagship beside the cold dead star, Fleet Lord Serac watched the last faint trace of the human ship fade from the ruined scanners. Analyst Talon came to stand beside him, and for a while neither of them spoke. "We measured the whole galaxy," Serac said at last, very softly. "Every ship, every stone, every star. We were so proud of all we knew." He shook his old grey head. "And in all that measuring, we never once learned to measure the one thing that mattered, the will of a small and stubborn people to change faster than we could ever hope to guess." Talon looked out at the empty dark where the humans had gone. "Then we had better learn," she said, "while we still can." Serac said nothing, but deep in his old and careful heart, he thought that perhaps she was right, and perhaps it was already too late, and perhaps the finest fleet in the sector had just watched its whole world change and had been too proud to see it happen. The dead star gave off no light, the dark gave up no answers, and somewhere far away, a salvage boat that no scanner could ever name flew quietly home. The end.